Hey kids, this is Chef Jack with another edition of Marvel vs. DC. You all know the rules by now. Englentine and I have divided up every single comic book released by both DC and Marvel, and each week we review those new releases. We give each book a score of 1 to 5 stars, and at the end we average out the points, and the publisher with the best average score is the winner for that week. With all that said, let's get this party started. Mother Panic number 10. This was just so very disappointing. Just as I think that Mother Panic's found its footing and is beginning to get good, this happens. The storyline for this issue is entirely opaque, or maybe cryptic is the right word. It's become less a Batman-esque crime drama and more a CW-esque emotional drama, and that just bores me. I mean, I get it. Violet has deep psychological scars from her strict Catholic school assassin training, but I thought that she got over them last issue, didn't she? And as the saying goes, it'll never heal if you don't stop picking. Oh, and hey, here's something new. She's suddenly a lesbian. You know, that might have been cool and original if they hadn't done it first with Kathy Kane, or, you know, Renee Montoya. And lastly, for a title this gritty, the artwork in this issue was just way, way too cartoony. Nothing worked in this issue at all. XMen Gold number 10. This is a disappointment after the promise of last issue. The events of this issue are not laid out organically, and they feel forced. Everything happens in a ham-fisted way, with way too much reliance on Deus Ex Machina and convenient coincidences, like the sudden appearance of magic when she wasn't in any other issue in this title, for example. The plot is disjointed. The transitions from one scene to another are awkward. The character interactions are flat and way too brief. The contrived, overly one-sided fight scene actually angered me in a way that no action sequence has done since the Deathstroke versus the JLA fight in Identity Crisis. This was outrageous, and it was unacceptable. And again, I have to ask, why the hell is Old Man Logan in every single X-Men book? Just don't bother with this one. The 2-star books. These comics might be bad, but there's usually one or two things that save them from being truly horrible. Batgirl number 14. I'm trying to figure out where to start on this one. Okay. How about this? This is the first part of the Summer of Lies storyline, and while it does everything a first part is supposed to do, the story it sets up is utterly uninteresting. And not only that, it's all over the place. I mean, at one point, Batgirl and Nightwing are quipping that the villains should have been more threatening, and the very next moment, those villains throw themselves off a roof to their death onto the street below. I mean, it's total mood whiplash. And then the issue ends on a cliffhanger, quote-unquote, that really isn't a cliffhanger at all. You know, there's a villain who's pulling the strings behind everything, and we do not see her identity. But you know what? A blind man could tell you who she was. The Alice in Wonderland references were cool, though. Batman Beyond number 11. Oh my lord, did this book piss me off. Up until this issue, the story, this fight between Terry McGinnis and Damian Wayne, it had been fun, it had been cool, and it had been pretty well done, both in art and story. This issue just ruins it. It ruins the entire goddamn thing. It's rushed and it's repetitive, and that's the best thing I can say about it. I was also hoping for something more than what the climax provided. I mean, in the end, it seems the entire point of all this wasn't to resolve some sort of father-son conflict between the three of them. It was just to, you know, oh, and by the way, Damian Wayne, this is what he looks like when he's going to be the new Ra's al Ghul. Really? That's all? The fact that Jurgens keeps dropping anvils on our head regarding how Terry isn't really like this and he's being used by the suit. Yeah, we get it. We got it the first time three issues ago. If it weren't for Bernard Chang's art, this might have been a 1-star book this week. Edge of the Venomverse number 5. You know, when I think back to the first issue of this miniseries, and I think back to the fact that I actually gave it 4 stars, I'm just, I don't know. I don't have a word for it, because I don't think I've given this series more than 2 stars since then. And this issue certainly doesn't buck that trend. I mean, this time we get Deadpool and the Venom symbiote. And you know what? I'm getting sick and damn tired of Deadpool. What can I say? I just am. I'm tired of him. He's everywhere and I'm tired of him. I'm over him so badly. Can we not have Deadpool for a while? Now I know, oh my God, he's marketable, he's popular, he's, we got to put him in everything. Yeah. No. And not, especially not the way he's presented here. The characterization of Deadpool here is even more obnoxious and horrible than usual. It makes me even more tired of this character's omnipresence. This, okay, I'll say this. The art looks great, but nothing else in this comic makes anybody remotely want to buy it. Suicide Squad number 24. This was an okay issue, but it wasn't a good one like the previous were. The mystery of just what has been going on gets revealed, but in my opinion, the twist was flawed and confusing. It comes off as just another Rob Williams Suicide Squad plot. I mean, oh look, another worldwide threat that happens to involve Amanda Waller. Boring. I want the team to go out on awesome, unique missions that require their specific touch. Things that don't involve great epic storylines that have specific goals and specific threats. But no, Rob Williams has to make all of them an Avengers movie. In addition, Agustin Padilla's art is just too murky and too ink heavy for me to appreciate it. Everything in this issue just was lacking, which is why I rated it like I did. XMen Blue number 9. This was just a disappointing conclusion to a disappointing storyline, guys. To be honest, though, I don't think I can blame the creative team, since they basically had to play whack-a-mole with the Secret Empire storyline, and that automatically made things start out from a crap position. All the characterization in this book is spotty. The action is bland. The dialogue gets cringy in way too many spots. There are a couple of interesting elements, sure. Polaris is always fun when she shows up, and she should show up more often. This is one of the chronically underused characters. The White Queen's obsession with young Scott is absolutely creeptastic, but the rest of it was just bad. And for the most part, the art was propping up the issue, but even that failed in spots. I'm hoping that now that Secret Empire is done, things improve. The 3-star books. These comics are just average. They fall neither on the good end of the spectrum, nor the bad. Astonishing XMen number 2. For the second issue in a row, this title totally failed to impress me. Don't get me wrong, it's not horrible or bad, it's just bland again. I mean, here's the thing. This was actually a pretty good story, but it was written in such a dry, stilted, formulaic way that it just didn't do anything for me. When Marvel announced this title, they promised that it would be new stories with all the fun and excitement and adventurous style of all the previous X-Men books. But, it isn't a bad story, this issue. It's just missing the fun and the excitement and the adventurous style that we all got promised. Just like with last issue, if you're an X-Men geek and you absolutely have to have every single issue that's got the letter X on it, by all means, go out and get this one. You'll love this story, I'm sure. Otherwise, it's up to you. The story isn't really bad, but it's not that good either. Blue Beetle number 12. I was really hoping that this creative team would figure out what the hell they were doing, because even though I really liked the Blue Beetle back in the old days, when it was Blue Beetle and Booster Gold and all that, this series has never really been ringing any bells for me. And I've wanted to like this series, but it's just not been happening. I mean, sure, it's had its high marks, but this issue's not one of them. And of course, Giffen and DeMatteis are leaving next issue, so they're not only not going to get their footing, but they're not even going to be able to tie up all the threads they just left dangling. So on top of everything else, despite the new dynamic between Jaime and the Scarab, and despite the amazingly intrusive inclusion of the Batman, this story just came off stiff and boring. Even the action was, I use the phrase paint by numbers. Everything just felt off. So while this wasn't a terrible book, in the end, it just didn't really work out that well. Green Lanterns 29. I'll be honest, this was not my favorite issue of this title. It had some good parts, don't get me wrong. The art was perfect as usual, but the story lacked some heart. I mean, it normally has a little more meat to it. And in some spots, all they did was rehash the same sort of scene over and over again. I mean, how many times do we have to see selfish people being selfish before we get the idea that, hey, these guys are selfish? Now, on the good side, it was great to see Jessica try and step up and be the boot camp sergeant and teach people how to be Green Lanterns. I mean, that's a great bit of character development given her history. And it was also good to see Simon actually go, you know what, I don't need a ring to be a hero, this is me. And of course, it was great that he didn't mention his goddamn brother-in-law. I'm tired of that. We also got to see why these individuals were tapped to be the original 7 Green Lanterns, which is also, it's still good. But all told, there's not much otherwise to keep this thing going. There was no urgency, for example, and it didn't feel like it was going anywhere. Too little, too late. Justice League number 27. The legacy story continues in this issue. Every part of it just seems way too conveniently written. The Leaguers immediately accept these kids into their, they welcome them with open arms and accept everything that they're saying. And don't think I didn't notice that the one person who would be so paranoid as to question everything isn't even in the room. Batman's gone. I mean, okay, true. The story that these kids are telling is compelling, especially the one between Hunter and Wonder Woman. But for crying out loud, you'd think at least somebody in the League would stop and go, wait, are you really expecting us just to buy into what you're saying? And, this issue doesn't really move the story along either. Nothing is explained, and as I noted, nobody's asking questions. We're not finding out anything we didn't already know. Also, having Diana skulk around with her head down doesn't feel right. It absolutely does not fit the strong warrior female image of Wonder Woman that we're used to, and every time she appeared, I found myself rolling my eyes. Luke Cage number 4. I'm really coming to dislike this trend of Marvel's that how they remake their comics to resemble their live-action counterparts. I think the movies should serve the comics and not the way around, or in this case, the TV shows. And the reemergence of the man who gave Luke's powers here is what I'm talking about. It's taken right out of the Luke Cage Netflix series instead of the comic book that has been, part of the continuity for 40 years now. That part of the book was a huge letdown for me, especially since so much of this issue deals with his relationship with that man. It comes off as flat and forced. The artwork, on the other hand, goes a long way toward redeeming the issue, and it does make the closing fight seem dynamic and compelling. I'm still not thrilled with the story, but at least David Walker's Luke Cage reads like Luke Cage sounds, and that's more than we can say for some comics. Teen Titans number 11. I've been a fan of this franchise since the Wolfman Perez days, and every time I read a new issue, I try my hardest not to judge it against that standard of quality, but I do expect to have at least a good story. I want to have a good time with it, and I didn't have a good time with this issue. Don't get me wrong, there were some fun spots. I mean, we did finally get to see Jackson be called Aqualad officially, despite the fact that all of us readers have been calling him that since he first appeared. And I did like how, for example, Black Manta was such a cold-hearted bastard that he did use his own son for evil purposes, even when he did so while appearing to be a real dad. On the other hand, the interpersonal angst in this title is just getting stale. Damian Wayne is still a colossal prick. Why do people still let him be a colossal prick? I'm hoping that now the team seems to be getting together, we can actually have some fun stories. The Kamandi Challenge number 8. Some issues of the Kamandi Challenge kind of dispose of last issue's cliffhanger way too quickly and way too conveniently than others, and this is one of those issues. I mean, it's not like we were in any hurry to get to the story, which is about a gang of anthropomorphic sheep having a war with a gang of anthropomorphic wolves. I honestly felt like I was slogging through this issue. It was a pretty good impression of the absolute worst aspects of Jack Kirby's storytelling, which is the occasional bouts of pointless wandering. Don't get me wrong, I love Jack Kirby's work, but every once in a while he could dip into that I'm just gonna expound and go nowhere style of storytelling. So if you've read this series up until now, go for it. Go ahead and grab this issue too. Otherwise, it's really up to you. The Punisher number 15. I'm thinking back and I can't actually remember. Has Frank Castle ever used a subway train to take down a bad guy before? This issue's story is a bit problematic. On the one hand, the idea of it is great. The idea of a highly organized, highly intelligent serial killer who for the most part just outthinks the Punisher is great. As is the use of the fact that not everybody is going to see Frank Castle as a serial killer. On the other hand, the story was wrapped up with a little bow way too neatly. The characterizations of pretty much everybody in this story are inconsistent, and the art is just too cartoony for a title this gritty. It's a 3-star book because its downsides match its upsides stride for stride. Ultimates 2 number 100. The story in this issue suffers from being way too out there, you know, and of course it's about multiple universes and abstract concepts and, you know, beings that are more idea than actual being having a war on each other. So I guess it's understandable. And in a way, this is classic Marvel storytelling from the days of Kirby and Ditko. But their use in this title leads to vagaries about, you know, reality, and it makes for a confusing narrative. The book suffers too much from the exposition. That's it. It's too much exposition. And it's exposition that is filled with cosmic mumbo-jumbo that is sometimes just as forced and hard to understand as the technobabble from Star Trek. By the end of the issue, you're honestly left wondering just what the hell happened. I mean, sure, it was fun to watch, but I came out of it scratching my head about what it all meant. The 4-star books. Now we're getting to the good stuff. These are the comics we can actually recommend. All New Guardians of the Galaxy number 8. Overall, this issue was just a fun book. I mean, yeah, sure, the plot isn't really moved along at all, and there's no real sense of drama because, you know, we know Marvel isn't going to kill Rocket. But it's still a pretty fun book. The action is cool. The snark is exactly what you expect from this title. Marcus Toe's art absolutely keeps up pace with the action. The biggest problem is that it's narrative. It's not at all clear exactly how Peter Quill wins the fight that he's in. It just kind of happens off screen, and that kind of weakened the story for me. But in the end, though, buying this issue might be worth it just to see Rocket slung up on Drax in a baby carrier like he was a 1-year-old. That scene just made me chuckle. Astro City number 46. This is a really complicated issue to get into, but once you manage to wrap your head around it, there is not a lot here that isn't enjoyable. This is the last part of the Broken Man story about music and history and rebellion and heroes and the mystical threat of the Obor. For a comic that usually takes such a realistic view of superheroes and the world around the superheroes, this story is absolutely buried in the fantastic. It's one long fantasy story. It's also a bit of a trippy read. And like I said, it might take you more than one go through to actually understand what they're saying. Either way, though, it's definitely worth picking up and taking a look at it. And plus, you know, who doesn't love pierogies, right? Doctor Strange number 24. Now that the rampant mess that is Secret Empire is winding down, the tie-in issues can finally stop sitting around on their asses and get on with it. So if you're looking for an important chapter in the entire Secret Empire saga, this is not it, guys. If you want a Doctor Strange Baron Mordo showdown, you've come to the right place. The action in this issue is pretty well constructed, even if the dialogue sometimes just doesn't really suit the characters. In addition, while the art is fine overall, there are spots where it just does not work because it's way too murky. Also, I was really hoping for a stronger payoff than the one we eventually got. Don't get me wrong, it was an enjoyable story. But, you know, it could have been better. But on the whole, this issue worked out pretty well, especially as an ending to the forced senescence, and yes, that's a word, guys, senescence, go look it up, and a departure of the Secret Empire crap. I mean, it had a few minor problems, but they were minor problems. Immortal Iron Fist number 3. This title is actually becoming a pretty well-written martial arts adventure for the tween set. I mean, it seems to be aimed at them. It reminds me sort of like the old Jackie Chan Adventures cartoon, to be honest. The storyline's great, the dialogue feels real, the plot's interesting. Paige struggles to become acclimatized to American culture, clashes with how she's been raised up till now. Danny Rand is struggling to figure out how to handle effectively becoming a father. I mean, I know he constantly says, "I'm not your father," but you know what? He's taken that place. He's stepped into that role. Carrie Andrews is doing a fantastic job of portraying how both of those struggles can be. If only the art weren't so awful. I mean, really, just because you're aiming a title at the 13-year-olds doesn't mean you actually have to hire one to draw on the book. Yeah, I know, Aphra is older than 13, but that just makes it worse. Invincible Iron Man number 10. This just seems like a week for surprises. Turns out that when you take out all the SJW nonsense and concentrate on telling a fun story, the quality improves. Who knew, right? Brian Michael Bendis, gets out of his own way and shows us what was really good about the character of Riri Williams. Her idealism and her willingness to help people, and her willingness to go that extra mile to make sure people are helped, in fact, while avoiding all the tired old, "I'm an amazingly smart replacement for Tony Stark who was a white man and I'm not a white man so I'm automatically better" crap that we were getting in the previous issues. There is a ton of great things in this issue, from how, the recognition of how first world nations often don't even bother understanding what problems other countries are going through, all the way down to how Riri's mother deals with temporarily being a member of the Latvian royal family. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but this is the best issue in this series we have seen so far. Manhunter Special number 1. Before I go on to my quick review, I want to give you guys a heads up. I am going to be doing a full-length look at this book in another video, so keep your eyes out for it. But now on to my review. As with the other Jack Kirby tribute specials, this book is pure nostalgia. It does have some hokey 1940s dialogue that at the time seems, but these days would seem very cringy. But all that said, what you get in this book is a very respectful, nuanced tribute to Jack Kirby and one of his lesser-known characters, Paul Kirk, the big game hunter turned crime fighter named the Manhunter. There's also a short side story featuring Jason Blood and Etrigan the Demon, who are two more of Kirby's classic creations. Unfortunately, the Etrigan story just doesn't match the sheer excitement and vitality of the Manhunter story for overall, and it's not as quality either. It was a nice attempt, but it just didn't hit. But overall, this is a very good book, and I really enjoyed reading it. Star Wars Dr. Aphra Annual number 1. Despite the name, this issue doesn't actually deal much with Dr. Aphra at all, so much as it tells us the background story of Black Krrsantan, the Wookiee. It gives us his story, his focus, and his plans for the future. It's a really entertaining story. It gives us a very nuanced look at just why it is that he's so violent. Why is it that he's so good at being violent? And why that he's so determined to take revenge on the Zonti brothers. there's some solid surprises here, enough to make this formerly one-dimensional Wookiee into a far more complex character than he ever has been portrayed as prior to this. There were some problems with the issue, most of them stemming from inconsistencies in the artwork, but even they were not enough to sink it. This is a fun issue, guys. The Sandman Special number 1. As I said in my full-length review, I really enjoyed this book. There are, several stories, all of which are fun. They're all light and they're breezy, and they're all really quick-paced. The storytelling doesn't feel rushed at all for any of them. Not for the recreations of Kirby's style, not for the ones that are actual reprints of Kirby's. If there were any complaints here to be made at all, it's that none of the stories really lasted long enough for me. Just as I wanted more. I really could have done with, say, 3 or 4 more stories. They were all very cool. But otherwise, that's all. That was my complaint. I wanted more and I didn't get it. This book is just filled with really good stuff. The 5-star books. These books are the best of the best, at least for this week. These are the ones that we recommend the most. Batwoman number 6. This is the first issue in the Open Fire storyline. The story's set in a near-future Gotham City where things are much worse for the people who live there. Not because of an increase in the crime, but because of the opposite. The law enforcement has gone so far as to become draconian. We're given plenty of info regarding how this came about, and surprisingly, it's not just info dumped on us in one big pile. In addition, enough things are left out of the explanation to bring us back for the next issue. I mean, I want to read the next issue now, please. Special mention should go out to Adriano Lucas's work on the colors. Normally when an artist uses that washed out sepia tone, it doesn't really work, but in this book it just fits like a glove. If you're a fan at all of cyberpunk, near-future, dystopian science fiction, this one is for you. Black Panther and the Crew number 5. Guys, if Ta-Nehisi Coates had been telling stories at this level all along, maybe this title wouldn't have been canceled. Maybe the next issue might not have had to have been the last issue. I'm just going to lay it all out. This story works on every single level, and it works well. Seeing Manifold from the old X-Men stories show up and kick some robot ass as he assaults the Americops was a fantastic action sequence. His motivations for doing so are absolutely sound and are not based in racist bullshit. And it definitely tells a better story than we've seen up until this point. In addition, with this story, Coates actually points out the difference between actual activism, actually wanting to get things done to make things better, and self-serving criminal behavior that only looks like activism, but is really nothing more than mob activity. It's honestly sad that Coates took this long to get it. Daredevil number 25. This issue's what the storyline has been building up to for the last few chapters, and man, is it a great one. It was just a solid conclusion to a solid story, both in respect to the art and the writing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you are a fan of legal dramas, this title is for you. I think Marvel made a brilliant decision to bring Charles Soule into the title because he's a lawyer on top of being a comic book writer, and thus he can spin all the legal stuff into something that's believable and exciting and works just as well for Daredevil, or even better for Matt Murdock, as putting Daredevil in a street fight. Now, if you're not a fan of legal dramas, this issue's reliance on dialogue and legal terminology might not be for you. But if you're a fan of, like I said, if you're a fan of Matt Murdock as much as you are a fan of Daredevil, the attorney versus the costume crime fighter, you're going to absolutely love this book. Absolutely love it. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 27. Now, technically this is a tie-in with the Metal miniseries. And I know that I've pretty much held in the past that forced tie-ins make for weaker books. This one seems to be an exception. It seems to be an exception. This issue stands on its own surprisingly well. You could know absolutely nothing about metal and find the story in this book completely understandable. Nothing confusing at all. And I love how Venditti plays up the absolute diversity of the members of the Green Lantern Corps. Each member brings something new and unique to the table, and they have their own specialty. Wait a second. Diversity in the Green Lantern Corps. Where have I heard that phrase before? Where have I heard something about diversity in the Green Lantern? You know what? Never mind. Never mind. Anyway, this is a great story, and I cannot wait to see where it's going next. Nightwing, The New Order, #1. All the elements that make this book great we've seen in other places, but the way that they are used here make them seem fresh and brand new all over again. It's set in a dark, dystopian, almost post-apocalyptic world in which a huge battle has killed most of the world's heroes. The primary conflict is a law that makes superheroing illegal, and even possessing superpowers themselves illegal. It gives us a strong message that discrimination is wrong. I mean, we've heard this message before, but believe it or not, we don't come out of reading this book thinking that we've just been hit over the head with a sledgehammer because of it. And the book ends with a cliffhanger that made me excited to see more. I want to see the next issue. It reads well, and I think it's going to be pretty good in moving on from the future, because this is an absolutely marvelous start. Silver Surfer #13. I'll admit, I'm a bit of a softie, and I'm also a bit of a sentimentalist, and I'm a classic romantic. I mean, I will fall for it every time. What that means is this issue caught me by surprise. It just hit me right where it lives. The story is about how Dawn and the Surfer get to live out their lives in a universe beyond universes. And they get a full human lifetime. But of course, Norrin Radd isn't human. He's immortal. Which means exactly what you think happens. It's a sad and amazingly romantic story. It hits all the right notes. You're going to feel this one, folks. Especially in the scenes in which Norrin has to say goodbye to Dawn. It's beautiful. This one is absolutely beautiful. Trinity #12. The last several issues of Trinity have really not impressed me at all. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, it hasn't been horrible, but it's been nothing to write home about. That said, when I saw the cover of this issue with, you know, Zatanna and Constantine and Deadman, I got a little bit more excited because I really like those characters. And then when I read the book, it was, you know, it was like, okay, wow, this is what I've been looking for. Ken Marion's artwork was perfect. The plot advances wonderfully without wasting a single note. What started out as a relatively boring story in the previous issues involving, you know, the demon and Cersei and Ra's al Ghul is ramping up into something that feels truly epic. I was hooked on the very first page, and as this issue progresses, I found myself just getting more and more into it. And on top of everything, the homage to The Exorcist at the very beginning of this book, hilarious. Just hilarious. And now to round up the scores. Marvel Comics had 1 1-star book, 2 2-star books, 4 3-star books, 5 4-star books, and 3 5-star books. That gives them a total score of 52 points. I reviewed 15 books from Marvel this week for an average score of 3.47. DC Comics, on the other hand, had 1 1-star book, 3 2-star books, 5 3-star books, 3 4-star books, and 4 5-star books, for a grand total of 54 points. I reviewed 16 books from DC for an average score of 3.36, which means, folks, that for the first time in a long time, and by a margin of only 0.11 points, Marvel actually pulled it out and won this thing. But folks, what did you think about these comics? Was I right? Was I wrong? Was I, you know, just completely full of it? Tell me why you think so in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more of them, click like and subscribe and the little notification bell in the corner so you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you feel like helping out, we've got a Patreon page and a VidMe page set up, and there are links below. Feel free to wander over and drop $1 in the till. But even if you don't do that, thanks for taking the time out to watch. We do appreciate it, and we hope to catch you next time. Thank you very, very much for watching.